The grand palace of Zorthar stood like a mountain of glass and crystal. Its tall spires reached into the clouds, each one glowing with soft blue light. The air smelled faintly of flowers from the hanging gardens that wrapped around the palace. Walls. Inside, the great hall of harmony was filled with leaders, warriors, and nobles from across the galaxy. It was a special day, the ceremony of unity, held only after great wars had ended. This time, the galaxy had survived a war against the Krev, a brutal insectoid species that had almost consumed 3 star systems. The Galactic Alliance had won, but the victory came with heavy sacrifices. Every species had lost thousands of warriors. Now, the leaders had gathered to honor the bravest among them. Humans were the newest members of the Alliance, but their role in the war had been impossible to ignore. They had fought on the deadliest fronts, in conditions that other species considered impossible. The Krev feared them, not because of their technology, but because of their refusal to surrender. One of those humans stood at the edge of the hall, watching silently. Captain Elias Ward was not a giant by alien standards. Many of the species present were taller or heavier, but Elias wore the full ceremonial battle armor of the Earth Defense Forces, heavy scratched metal plates reinforced with advanced composites. Every dent and burn mark told a story. The helmet covered his face, a black visor hiding his eyes. As he walked forward, alien eyes followed him. Some were filled with respect, others with suspicion, and some with outright dislike. Humans were unpredictable. They didn't always follow the careful, centuries-old rules of diplomacy that other species valued. High above the hall, sitting on a raised dais, was Princess Vera of Zorthar. She was young, no more than 20 cycles, but already known for her sharp tongue. Her golden skin shimmered in the light, and her eyes were a bright, piercing silver. She had grown up in a palace where humans were spoken of as useful but uncivilized. She had never fought in a war. She didn't understand what it meant to bleed for survival. When Elias reached the center of the hall, the Zorthar Emperor rose and spoke. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying across the crystal walls. "Today we honor those who stood when others fell," the Emperor said. "Representatives from every world are here. Among them is Captain Elias Ward of Earth, survivor of the Siege of Varos, defender of the North Rift, and rescuer of the Charkan delegation." There was polite applause. Elias gave a small nod. He did not bow. Humans did not bow easily, even to emperors. Princess Vera leaned toward her father, her voice carrying just enough for others nearby to hear. "This is the human everyone talks about. I thought he would look more impressive." Some nearby courtiers chuckled. The words traveled quickly, whispered from one alien to another until they reached Elias's ears. He said nothing, but his helmet turned slightly toward the dais. Vera's voice grew louder. "Why does he hide behind such ugly metal? Is his skin too fragile for the eyes of the court?" The hall grew quieter. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably. A few smirked, waiting to see how the human would respond. Elias stepped forward until he stood directly beneath the dais. His voice, when it came, was calm, almost gentle, but it carried through the hall. "Your Highness," he said, "armor is only part of what makes a soldier. It is not the only thing that keeps him alive." Vyra tilted her head, smiling in a way that was more mocking than friendly. "So you admit you need it? That without it you would be as weak as any untrained civilian?" There was a ripple of laughter from some of the younger nobles. Elias did not move. His visor remained fixed on her. "In war," Elias said slowly, "armor can be broken, weapons can be lost. The only thing that cannot be taken is the will to keep fighting." The words silenced many in the crowd, but Vyra only laughed. "We will see, human. I think without that shell, you would be nothing." The Emperor raised a hand to quiet her, but the damage was done. The court had heard the challenge in her tone. Elias turned without another word and walked back to his place at the edge of the hall. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, some filled with doubt, some with curiosity. The rest of the ceremony continued. Speeches, awards, diplomatic promises, but a quiet tension lingered. Vira occasionally glanced at Elias, expecting him to look angry or embarrassed. Instead, he stood still, unmoving, like a mountain waiting for a storm to pass. When the event ended, Vira approached him in the palace garden. The night sky of Zorthar was strange to human eyes. 3 moons, each a different color, hung over the crystal towers. "You carry yourself like a warrior," she said, "but I think you are afraid to face danger without your machines." Elias looked at her, his expression hidden behind the black visor. "And I think you've never faced danger at all," her eyes narrowed. "You insult me." "I speak the truth," Elias replied. "If you want to know what a human is without armor, you'll have to see for yourself." A smile spread across Vira's face, cold and confident. "Then I challenge you. 3 days in the crystal wastes. No armor, no weapons, no technology. Survive, if you can." The crystal wastes. Even most Zorthari avoided that place. It was a land of razor-sharp crystal spires, sudden storms of acid rain, and predators that hunted without mercy. Elias considered her words for only a moment. "I accept." She looked almost surprised at how quickly he agreed. "You may not return. Then you will know what humans are," Elias said. Without another word, he turned and walked away, the sound of his heavy boots echoing in the garden. The challenge had been made. The court would soon hear of it. And somewhere deep inside, the young princess felt a spark of doubt she couldn't explain. For the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake. The news spread through the grand palace like fire in dry grass. The human captain had accepted the princess's challenge. Servants whispered it in the corridors, guards repeated it at their posts, and nobles discussed it over crystal goblets of glowing wine. By the next morning, every important figure in the capital knew. Many were certain Elias Ward would not survive. The crystal wastes were not just dangerous, they were death itself for the unprepared. Even with armor, most soldiers avoided them. Without protection, the razor storms would tear through flesh, and the predators, the swift, 6-legged shard beasts, could smell blood from kilometers away. Yet the human had agreed without hesitation. The gathering. The Great Hall of Trials was filled again the next day. Word of the event had attracted half the royal court. The Zorthar Emperor sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Princess Vira looked confident, almost smug. She had chosen this trial herself, and she expected the outcome would humiliate the human. Elias entered the hall wearing the same heavy battle armor he had worn at the ceremony. It looked even more battered in the bright light of the chamber. Every step echoed loudly, the sound of his boots against the polished floor. The crowd murmured as he stopped in the center of the hall. Vira stood. "Captain Elias Ward, you have agreed to the trial. 3 days in the crystal wastes. No armor, no weapons, no technology, only your body and mind." Elias looked up at her and nodded once. "I remember." Her silver eyes glittered. "Then, remove your armor before the court. Show us the human beneath the shell." Removing the armor, the hall went silent. Elias reached up and unlocked his helmet with a sharp click. Slowly, he lifted it away, revealing a face weathered by war, strong jaw, short dark hair, and eyes the color of cold steel. There were scars along his cheek and near his temple. He set the helmet aside without looking away from Vira. Piece by piece, he removed the armor. The chest plate came first, revealing a simple dark undershirt stretched across broad shoulders and a powerful frame. Then the arm guards, the leg plates, and finally the heavy boots. Each piece landed on the floor with a deep thud. When the last piece was gone, Elias stood barefoot on the smooth crystal tiles. His arms were lined with scars, some long and thin, others jagged, the marks of claws or blades. A burn scar traced down the side of his neck. His hands were calloused, his knuckles rough. Some in the crowd gasped. Others stared in quiet fascination. To many of them, humans had always been a mystery, hidden behind armor and weapons. Seeing one like this was like seeing the raw core of a star. One Zorthari general leaned toward another and whispered, "Those are not the marks of weakness." The princess's words, Vera's confident smile, faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "You look different than I expected," she said. Elias tilted his head slightly. "Different how?" "More damaged," she said with a faint smirk. "Every scar," Elias replied, "means I stood when someone else would have fallen." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. A few of the alien officers in the hall nodded slightly. Vira said nothing more. The farewell official from the Hall of Trials stepped forward with a recording device. "Do you require a survival pack or rations?" he asked. Elias shook his head. "No, that would defeat the point." The official hesitated. "You will have no support once you enter the wastes. We cannot send rescue teams without risking more lives." "I understand," Elias said simply. The Emperor finally spoke. His deep voice carried across the chamber. "Human, return alive, and the Zorthar will remember your name for 1,000 years." Elias met his gaze and gave a small nod. "Then I will return." Into the wastes. The crystal wastes lay just beyond the capital's protective energy fields. From the palace gates, they could already be seen. A jagged expanse of towering crystal shards, each one glittering in the harsh sunlight. The ground between them was cracked and dry, stained with strange mineral colors. A shuttle carried Elias to the edge. A small crowd had gathered there as well. Nobles, soldiers, and curious citizens. They wanted to witness the moment the human entered what many called the endless grave. The shuttle door opened. Elias stepped out, the hot wind immediately hitting his face. It carried the faint metallic scent of the crystals, and in the distance, a low, eerie howl rose and faded. Vira had come to watch his departure. She stood at the observation platform, arms crossed, her royal guards beside her. "This is your last chance to withdraw," she called out. Elias glanced up at her. "If I wanted an easy life, Princess, I would never have left Earth." Without waiting for a reply, he stepped off the landing platform and began walking into the glittering labyrinth. The crystals caught the sunlight and reflected it in sharp, blinding flashes. His figure grew smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. Whispers in the palace back in the palace. The challenge became the topic of every conversation. Some believed Elias would die within hours. Others were less certain. General Koresh, a veteran of many campaigns, spoke quietly to another officer. "You've never fought beside humans, have you?" "No," the officer admitted. "Only heard stories." "Stories don't do them justice," Koresh said. "I've seen them keep fighting with broken bones and bleeding wounds. If that one survives the first night, he might just finish the 3 days." Vira overheard part of this and frowned. She told herself it was just arrogance keeping him alive so far. But somewhere deep inside, she began to feel the smallest flicker of doubt. The first night, while the court speculated, Elias moved deeper into the wastes. The sun burned hot during the day, but the night was worse. Freezing winds that cut through skin like knives. He searched for shelter before darkness fell and found a narrow gap between two giant crystal spires. Using shards of broken crystal, he fashioned a small barrier against the wind. As the twin moons rose, distant screeches echoed across the plains. He could see shapes moving between the shards, low and fast, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, shard beasts. Elias stayed still, conserving his strength. He knew they hunted by sound and smell. He would fight if they came close, but until then, patience was his best weapon. Hours passed. The cold bit into his muscles, but he endured it. Survival was not about comfort. It was about lasting until the next sunrise. By the time dawn touched the wastes with pale light, Elias was still alive, and he had not taken a single step back toward the palace. And far away, in the warmth of her royal chamber, Princess Vyra received the first scout report. The human had survived the night. Her silver eyes narrowed. Perhaps this would not be as simple as she thought. The second day in the crystal wastes began with a thin red sun rising over the jagged horizon. The light made the crystal spires glow like blood. The wind was sharp and dry, scraping across Elias Ward's face as he stepped out from his small shelter. His muscles ached from the cold night, but his mind was clear. The air was silent except for the occasional hiss of the wind. No birds, no insects, only the emptiness of a land that wanted everything in it to die. Elias scanned the ground ahead. The cracked surface hid pockets of unstable crystal that could slice open skin or trap a leg. He moved carefully, his bare feet avoiding the sharpest edges. Each step was deliberate. In the distance, he saw movement. A long shadow slipping between the spires. Shard beasts. He had seen them the night before, but this was closer. They were built for this land. 6 legs, low bodies, and armor-like plates of dark crystal across their backs. Their jaws could crush bone, and their claws could dig through rock. He knew they would not stop hunting him. The predators circle. By midday, the heat was almost unbearable. The crystals reflected the sun's light, making the ground shimmer like molten glass. Sweat ran down Elias's face. He needed water. He remembered the scout reports he'd read before. There were underground pockets where condensation gathered. If he could find a spire with enough shade, water might be hiding in the cracks. As he searched, he noticed something that made him slow his steps. 3 sets of claw marks in the dust, forming a half circle around his path. The beasts were herding him. Elias's breathing stayed steady. If they wanted to control his path, it meant they were confident he would be cornered soon. He could try to run, but running would only make him weaker. Instead, he changed direction, moving toward the tallest crystal spire he could see. High ground meant better sight lines and more defensive options. The first fight. He reached the spire just as the first shard beast appeared, sliding out from behind a cluster of smaller crystals. Its black eyes locked on him. A second beast emerged. To the left. Elias crouched and picked up a long shard of crystal from the ground. It was heavy and sharp at the tip. Not a perfect weapon, but it would have to do. The first beast lunged, claws scraping on the crystal floor. Elias sidestepped, driving the shard forward into the gap beneath its front armor plate. The beast shrieked, a high, sharp sound that echoed across the wastes. It twisted violently, throwing him back. The second beast charged immediately. Elias rolled aside, grabbing a smaller shard from the ground. When the creature turned toward him, he threw the shard with all his strength. It struck the beast's left eye. The animal stumbled, roaring in pain, but he didn't wait to finish them. The beasts were not alone. There would be more coming after the sound. He ran, moving deeper into the maze of spires until the roars faded behind him. In the palace back in the Zorthar capital, Princess Vyra sat in the Hall of Reports, reading updates from the palace scouts. Each one made her frown a little more. Still, alive? She asked the scout captain. Yes, Highness, he was spotted this morning moving east. He fought off 2 shard beasts. Vyra's silver eyes narrowed. Fought them? Without weapons? The scout hesitated. With only crystal shards, Highness, the court murmured. General Koresh hid a small smile behind his hand. I told you, he said quietly to no one in particular. Vyra stood, her voice sharper now. Keep watching him. I want to know the moment he falls. But in her mind, the certainty she had at the beginning of the challenge was starting to fade. The rescue. By the evening of the second day, Elias had found what he was looking for. A shaded hollow at the base of a massive crystal wall. Water dripped slowly from a crack, forming a small pool. He knelt and drank deeply. The water was cold and clean, tasting faintly of minerals. His strength returned, but as he stood, he heard a sound. Faint, desperate. It was a voice. He followed it, weaving through the narrow paths between spires until he found the source. A Zorthari scout, half buried under a collapsed shard. His breathing was weak, and blood stained the sand around him. The scout's eyes widened when he saw the human. You shouldn't be here, he rasped. Neither should you, Elias said. Without hesitation, he began lifting the heavy shard. His muscles strained, but he managed to shift it enough to pull the scout free. The man's leg was badly cut. Elias tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped it tightly. Why? The scout asked, confusion in his voice. We are not allies out here. We're both alive, Elias said simply. That's enough. He helped the scout to a sheltered spot with water, left him with a crystal shard for defense, and marked the location in his memory for the palace rescue teams. The second. Night came faster than he expected. The air turned cold again, and the wind carried the sound of more predators. Elias built a small barrier with crystal pieces and crouched low. He thought of Earth, the snow-covered training camps in the mountains, the deserts where he had learned to survive without food for days. The wastes were harsher, but the principles were the same. Stay alert, move smart, never waste energy. Somewhere in the dark, he heard the low growl of a shard beast. He didn't move. The sound passed, fading into the distance. When the first light of dawn touched the crystals, Elias was still alive. In the throne room, on the morning of the third day, Vyra received another report. The human had not only survived, but had rescued one of her own scouts. She stared at the words for a long moment. Why would he risk himself for someone who cannot help him? She asked aloud. General Koresh answered without hesitation. Because, Princess, humans do not leave people behind. Even their enemies. She looked away, unsettled. Perhaps he wants to impress us. Koresh smiled faintly. He is not trying to impress anyone. That is what makes it impressive. Toward the end days, the sun rose higher. Elias began his final trek toward the edge of the wastes. His body ached, his lips were dry, and the cuts on his arms burned from the mineral dust. But he moved steadily, never slowing. He passed the remains of a shard beast skeleton, its bones glittering faintly in the sunlight. One of its claws was still sharp. He took it, tying it to his belt with another strip of cloth, not for defense, but as proof of the trial. When he finally saw the faint shimmer of the capital's energy shield in the distance, he knew he had made it. But the trial was not yet over. The third day's sun was sinking low when the guards at the eastern watchtower of Zorthar saw movement beyond the energy shield. At first, they thought it was a trick of the light. The shimmering heat of the crystal wastes often made strange shapes dance on the horizon. But as the figure grew closer, their eyes widened. It was him. Captain Elias Ward was walking slowly but with steady steps. His clothes were torn and covered in dust, his skin cut in many places, but his posture was unbroken. Slung over his shoulder was the skull of a shard beast, large, heavy, and gleaming with sharp edges. The guard captain immediately sent word to the palace. Within minutes, the grand hall was filling with nobles, soldiers, and curious citizens, eager to witness what many had thought impossible. The hall falls silent. When Elias stepped through the main gates, the crowd parted. Whispers filled the air, not the mocking tones from before, but low, awed voices. He survived. 3 days without armor, and he killed a shard beast? The heavy skull made a loud thunk each time it bumped against his back. He carried it as if it were nothing more than a sack of grain. At the far end of the hall, the Zorthar Emperor sat on his throne. Beside him, Princess Vyra stared in silence, her silver eyes fixed on the human. Elias stopped in the center of the hall and let the skull slide from his shoulder. It landed with a deep, echoing boom on the crystal floor. "This," Elias said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the hall, "is what lives in your wastes. It hunts without fear. It does not care for armor, weapons, or rank. It only understands one thing: survival." The lesson, the crowd was silent. Every eye was on him. Elias took a slow breath. "You wanted to know what a human is without armor, Princess. This is your answer." Vyra's lips pressed together, her usual sharp reply caught in her throat. "A soldier's strength," Elias continued, "is not in what he wears. It is not in the weapons he carries. Those can be broken, taken, or destroyed. Strength is the will to keep moving when you are hungry, bleeding, and alone, because someone is counting on you to return." A murmur moved through the court. Even those who had doubted him now looked at him differently. Elias glanced toward the Emperor. "Your scout is alive, injured but alive. I left him with water and shelter. Send a team, and he will return home." The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. "You rescued one of ours when you could have left him to die." Elias nodded once. "Because no one should be left behind, human or Zorthari. The princess speaks, sir." A long moment, Princess Vyra said nothing. She looked at the skull, then at the scars across Elias's arms. She remembered the first day she saw him, standing silent in his heavy armor. She had thought him fragile beneath it. Now she was not so sure. Finally she stood. "Captain Elias Ward, I misjudged you. I thought your kind hid behind technology because you could not endure the hardships we face. I see now that I was wrong." The court gasped softly. A public admission of fault from the princess was rare. Elias gave a small nod. "People often misunderstand what they have never experienced." Vyra's eyes met his. "Then perhaps I should experience it myself." A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. "You wish to go into the wastes?" the Emperor asked. "Not alone," Vyra said. "With guidance, with training, from him." She pointed at Elias. A change in the court. The nobles began to speak at once, some in favor, others protesting. But the Emperor raised his hand, silencing them. "You have survived where even our best have failed," the Emperor told Elias. "You have earned the respect of the Zorthar court. If you will agree, you will train a team of our royal guards, and the princess herself, in your ways of survival." Elias did not hesitate. "I will." Vyra stepped down from the dais and stopped in front of him. For the first time, her voice held no mockery. "Then teach me, Captain. Show me what it means to stand without armor." A private moment. Later, when the hall had emptied and the skull of the shard beast had been placed in the royal trophy chamber, Vyra found Elias in the garden. The moons of Zorthar hung above, casting silver light across the crystal pathways. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. When I saw you in that armor, I thought you were hiding, but I see now you were carrying more than metal. You were carrying the weight of battles I've never fought." Elias looked at her for a long moment. "War isn't something to admire, Princess. It's something to survive. And if you survive, you make sure others do too." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe one day, I will understand." Elias's gaze turned toward the horizon, where the crystal wastes shimmered faintly even at night. Understanding comes with time, and with scars. A new beginning. The next morning, the palace buzzed with new energy. The challenge that had started as a way to humiliate a human had ended with respect, not just for Elias, but for all of humanity. In the training yards, soldiers from multiple species stood waiting. Some were curious, others were doubtful. All were ready to learn. Elias arrived wearing his armor again, the helmet tucked under his arm. Vyra stood among the trainees dressed in light combat gear. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. "Today," Elias said, his voice carrying across the yard, "you will learn how to survive without your weapons, without your armor, and without the comfort of the palace walls. You will learn what every human soldier knows, that strength is built when there's nothing left but your will to keep going." The soldiers listened in silence. Vyra smiled faintly. This time she was not mocking. The crystal dawn broke over the palace of Zorthar. The light spilled through the towering windows, casting rainbow reflections across the marble floors. The city was waking up, but inside the royal training grounds, things were already in motion. Captain Elias Ward stood at the center of the dusty field, wearing his battle armor again. This time it was freshly repaired, polished where it had been scarred, but still heavy with the history of many battles. Around him, dozens of warriors from different alien races stood in a wide circle, each holding practice weapons. Some had claws, others scales, some moved on 4 legs, and some floated without touching the ground. But all of them had come for one reason: to be trained by the human who had walked into the crystal wastes with nothing, and walked out alive. At the edge of the training field, Princess Vera sat on a high stone platform, her crystal blue eyes watching closely. The mocking smile she had once worn when looking at Elias was gone. Now her expression was sharp, almost curious. She had asked for this training herself. The royal guard needed to be stronger, she said. But Elias knew the truth. This was her way of showing that she now respected him. Elias gave a short nod to the warriors. "Today you will learn the first rule of survival," he said, his voice loud but calm. "Strength isn't in your armor, your claws, or your weapons. Strength is here." He tapped his temple. "And here." He placed a hand over his chest. A tall, red-scaled warrior stepped forward. "Humans speak too much," the alien growled. "We fight. We kill. That is strength." Elias didn't argue. Instead, he walked over to the warrior and suddenly grabbed a handful of sand from the ground, throwing it into the alien's eyes. The warrior roared in surprise, stumbling backward. Before he could recover, Elias swept his legs and dropped him to the ground. "That," Elias said quietly, "is strength. Knowing how to win before the fight even begins." The others murmured among themselves. Princess Vyra leaned forward in her seat, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Training the impossible. The drills were hard. Elias had them running through obstacle courses, crawling through mud, climbing walls, and carrying heavy stones. Some complained, others pushed themselves harder. Elias moved among them, correcting mistakes, shouting encouragement, and sometimes simply watching to see who would break first. When one of the Zorthari guards collapsed from exhaustion, Elias didn't yell at him. He crouched down beside him. "You think you can't go on," he said. "But you can. Stand up. If you can't stand, crawl. But never stop moving." The guard, breathing hard, pushed himself up and kept going. Vyra noticed this. It wasn't the kind of leadership she was used to. Her people believed in showing dominance, not lifting others up. But she could see the effect Elias had. The warriors were already becoming faster, smarter, and more united. A test of unity. After 2 weeks of training, Elias prepared the final test. "We're going back into the crystal wastes," he told them. "This time we go together, and we come back together. No one gets left behind." The group set out at dawn. Elias moved at the front, scanning the horizon. Vyra didn't go with them. She stayed behind, watching from the palace balcony as the group disappeared into the glittering desert. The wastes were just as deadly as before. Razor storms cut the air, acid rain burned the ground, and crystal beasts prowled between the jagged rocks. But the warriors had learned from Elias. They worked as a team. When a beast attacked, they trapped it with ropes and spears instead of fighting alone. When the acid rain came, they built shelters quickly, each warrior taking a role without being told. On the second night, they were surrounded by 3 crystal beasts at once. It was chaos, claws slashing, teeth snapping. But Elias kept, his voice steady. "Shields up! 2 on each beast! Don't waste movement!" The team moved like one creature, covering each other's backs, striking only when there was an opening. In the end, they drove the beasts away without losing a single fighter. The return, when they marched back into the city, carrying the remains of a slain beast, the palace guards saluted them. Vyra came down the marble steps herself to meet them. "You returned," she said to Elias, her voice softer than before. "We returned," Elias corrected, gesturing to the warriors behind him. Vyra looked at her soldiers. They stood taller now, their armor scuffed but their eyes bright with pride. She turned, back to Elias. "I see now," she admitted, "why your people are feared in the galaxy. It isn't your weapons. It isn't your machines. It's this unbreakable will." Elias gave a small shrug. "Weapons break, armor fails, but a soldier's will, that's the one thing you can't take away." A new alliance. In the weeks that followed, stories spread across the galaxy. Tales of the unarmored human who survived the wastes reached distant worlds. Species that once dismissed humans as primitive began to rethink their views. The Zorthari Royal Guard adopted human survival techniques, and the alliance between humans and Zorthar grew stronger than ever. One evening, Vyra found Elias standing on the balcony looking out at the city lights. "You've changed my people," she said quietly. "You've changed me." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I think you were ready to change. You just needed to see things from a different angle." Vyra tilted her head. "Will you stay? Train more of our people?" Elias didn't answer right away. He looked out at the glittering spires, then at the stars beyond. "I'll stay," he said finally, "but only if we keep training together. No more princess and soldier, just warriors." Vyra extended her hand. "Warriors, then." Elias took it, sealing the unspoken bond. Epilogue. The legend lives. On years later, the story was still told in the halls of the palace. Children acted out the scene of the unarmored human walking into the wastes. Soldiers of every race spoke, his name with respect. And somewhere, far beyond the crystal towers, Captain Elias Ward trained a new generation, not to be the strongest, not to be the fastest, but to be unbreakable. Because in the end, that was the real strength of humanity.